Hello, welcome to Bob's Dungeon. My name is Bob, I'll be your host. And in this video, we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into the D6 system and look at some of the little fiddly bits. But we're going to start with a little bit of a history of the D6 system. It was introduced by West End Games and really got its start with the Ghostbusters role-playing game. And later they released a revised version of those rules, which was Ghostbusters International. And where the D6 system really took off is when they came out with the Star Wars role-playing game for using the D6 system. They had a first edition, and then they came out with a second edition, which is the only core rule book for the D6 Star Wars that I have. And then they came out with a revised second edition, and they had just a ton of supplements for it, and I have a lot of the supplements, and we'll eventually look at those, but not in this video. But there was a lot of support for this game. And then later they came out with a Men in Black role-playing game using the D6 system. And the thing about West End Games was they were really big on getting the license for big properties and making role-playing games out of them. And most of them they put in their master book system, but eventually tried to funnel them into the D6 system, which personally I think is a better system, but that is what it is. And then soon after that, they came out with a core rulebook for the D6 system, which is basically the D6 rules put generic-like, very modifiable, so that you can put any story or game you want to the rules. And it has a lot of advantages, like being able to pick different attributes for your game. And standard in a D6 game is 6 attributes, but this book allows you to use 8 attributes if you want, 12 attributes, or go as few as 3. And goes through all the stuff for you, so you can put together whatever game it is you wish to play, which is pretty cool. After that, they came out with for all you Kevin Sorbo and Lucy Lawless fans, they came out with a Hercules and Xeno role-playing game in the D6 system. And before West End Games filed for bankruptcy, they had just released Indiana Jones into the D6 system. They had had the property for a while after TSR, and they were using it in their master book system, but before they filed for bankruptcy, they had fully converted it over to the D6 system. And then they filed for bankruptcy, and West End Games went away for a while. When they came back, they decided they were going to focus on the D6 system, and they came out with 3 core rulebooks for the system. They came out with D6 Fantasy, the D6 Adventure, and D6 Space. And each of them are pretty much the same rules set in a different genre. And the only one I got right now is D6 Fantasy. But I plan to get the others at some point. So, since this is the newest version of the D6 rules, we're going to mostly focus on it. And there are some differences from the old D6 rules and what came before they went bankrupt. One of the bigger changes is for a standard human, the range and attributes for the old system is 2 to 4. And when they came back, that had changed. Now it is 1 to 5. And in both of them, you still only get 18 dice to split amongst them in character creation. But we'll get to that. And it's pretty neat. The character creation process in this game, it gives you 3 options for making up characters. The first option is probably the easiest option. They have templates that you can use, which is basically generic characters, pre-made characters, and all the work is pretty much done for you. You just pick the one you want, and you put in your name, your description, and all that, and you're ready to go. You then have defined limits, and the defined limits sets you up with a number of points for each thing for you to distribute. For your attributes, it gives you 18 dice. You have to put 1 die in each of the attributes, and you can go no higher than 5. Now, if you wanted to, you could take one of those dice for the attributes and break it into peps. It breaks down into 3 peps. A pep is a +1. And so you could have an attribute of 2 die +2 if you wanted. And if not, you don't have to break your peps down and just put full dice in all your attributes. That's probably the easiest way to go about it. Then you have your skills, and you have 7 dice to split amongst your skills, and they can go no higher than 3 dice. And again, you can break a die down into 3 peps if you want. And then you figure up your body points or your wounds, which the Game Master should decide on what he's using before game begins, because there is a difference between the body points and the wounds. The wounds is when you take a hit, there's a chart that tells you how bad it hurt you are with the number of wounds you take. And with body points, the body points act as hit points that you'd find in other games such as Dungeons & Dragons. So you'll figure up your totals there depending on what your Game Master is using. You have your movement, which you start with 10 movement, and you figure up your strength damage, which they didn't have strength damage in the old D6 system. Instead, for weapons that use your strength, such as melee weapons, you would just roll your strength plus whatever bonus the die has, the weapon you're using has. But in this, it has a system for figuring out your strength damage, so that when you do damage, that's what you do. And then your Game Master will also have to decide whether he's using funds or silver in his game. And if he's using funds, then when you try to purchase things, it's a die roll. If he's using silver, it's just pretty much standard buying equipment like you would in any other game. Then you get 5 character points at character creation, and you get a fate point at character creation. In the Star Wars rules, they don't have fate points. That's replaced by force points. And you can have a total of 5 force points. Unless you're force sensitive, then you don't have a limit. And in this book, everybody gets fate points all the same, and there's no cap on it. The third way to create a character is you have a character creation pool. And in your character creation pool, you get 79 points to buy the different aspects of your character. And it comes out to 1 point per attribute die, 1 point per skill die, 3 points for specialization in the skill. Advantages and special abilities have their own costs. And, you know, that's pretty cool. The rest of the stuff is pretty much figured out as normal. Now, that's pretty much the character creation in a nutshell in the modern D6 fantasy game, or any D6 fantasy game. And the attributes in the D6 fantasy, D6 adventure, and the D6 space will be a little bit different, given that they're different genres. And to give an example, we'll go back here at the back of the book where they have a conversion chart or excuse me, that's in another book. That's in D6 Creatures. But the way it works is, there we go. And D6 Fantasy, it's intellect, while in the other two, it's knowledge. It's coordination in both D6 Adventures and D6 Fantasy, while it's mechanical in D6 Space. And D6 Fantasy, it's charisma, while in D6 Space, it's perception. And in D6 Adventure, it's presence. It's physique in both adventure and fantasy, while it's strength in space. And it's acumen in fantasy, technical in space, and perception in adventure. So that's different. And then there's different skills in each of them, of course. And that's a look at that. You got your different races in the game. So let's take a look at those. And the other races other than human is the dwarves, the elves, the gnomes, the reptile folk. And that's your lot in the core book. Now, what each of these does is they replace the human, of course, if that's what you're going to play. And they tell you the limits of your character's attributes now and any skills they have, because there'll be new limits for them, such as in the dwarf. Okay, hold on. In the dwarf, the attributes, skill dice, can be from 1 to 4. They gain the advantage of small size, and they have the disadvantages of hindrance, gruffness, hindrance, short stride, and then they have the special abilities, hardiness, and ultravision. And that's it on the dwarf, but each of them gives you advantages and disadvantages, mostly made out of the advantages and disadvantages listed later in the book, but they come as part of the character package. And if you were going to play a dwarf, it would cost you 4 of your character creation points. And you get everything that's listed there, your advantages, disadvantages, and everything, but you're stuck with the new limits. If you were to do an elf, it would only cost you 1 for the package, and no advantages. Your disadvantages are devotion to nature, arrogance, and hindrance, delicate. Your special abilities are enhanced sense, sight, longevity, and so forth. And each of them has their own thing. Now, it doesn't give a whole lot to creating a brand new race in here, but it does give a little bit. And you really have to work for it in order to get it, given what they got in here, in order to build a new one. And that's pretty much it. If you're going to create a brand new race for the game, for the players to be, the stuff you'll want to do is you want to think about what race you're going to create. Now, we'll look at it in 2 different ways. We will first look at it and just coming at things off the top of her head. Then we'll look at it through creating one from what's in the creature book. But anyway, the first thing you'll want to do is you'll want to figure up any limits to the character, his attributes and skills, such as if the character race is going to be weaker than a human, then you probably will say, oh, they have a range of strength from 1 to 3. So they have less dice that they can max out on their strength. You might say that they're much smarter, though, so you might say they can go all the way up to 6 dice in intelligence. And then you'll figure out advantages that the character might have, like if they're small, you know, what that could be an advantage because it'll help them out on being hit, give them a smaller scale value. And anything else that would be considered an advantage you could put in there. After you figure out the advantages, you'll want disadvantages, and this could be stuff like personality traits or that would hinder them, such as being, like the elves, arrogant, or being closed-minded. You know, they won't see anybody else's views but their own. They could be anything, really, that you can think of as a disadvantage could go there. And then you'll have special abilities. And the special abilities could be stuff like the ultravision, being able to see in the dark. It could be special claws to help them climb. Stuff like that. Anything that would be a special ability. And it has a list of special abilities and disadvantages later on in the book in a different chapter. And you can pretty much use those as a guideline for your advantages and disadvantages and so forth for the characters, special abilities. Now, that's pretty much all there is. After you figure it up, you want to figure up a cost for the package. They get all this stuff, but it'll cost them a number of their creation points at character creation. And if you're not using the creation point system, then these points will come out of their attributes or their skills. So, after that, we'll take a look at the creature book real quick and use a creature out of it to come up with a new race for the game. And what we'll do is we'll look up the goblin and make him into a player race, which shouldn't be too hard to do. And if I can find them. Minions of Evil, 57. Okay. Now, in the back here where it has the goblins, they give you what the typical goblin will have for attributes. And so you can look through there and determine what his minimums and maximums would be normally. Now, it doesn't actually give you a minimum, a maximum for all of them. It just gives you a typical goblin. But since goblins are small and weak, we'll go ahead and say that their strength is a 3 max. And since a typical goblin only has 1 in intelligence, we'll just go ahead and say his intelligence max is 3. And so forth and so on. And they don't have any advantages. They do have a disadvantage, which is devotion. And they have no special abilities. So, given that the devotion is the disadvantage is a 3, we'll go ahead and say that the goblin will cost you 1 point for the package because it's kind of weak, kind of a nothing. But it's not hard to come up with these things. Most of it is just out of your own mind. There's no real hard set in stone. You come up with your package for the alternate race, and then you assign a cost for it. And combat and stuff is very easy, and it requires 6-sided dice, and that's standard throughout the whole history of the D6 game. However, one of your 6-sided dice will be a different color. That different colored die will be your wild die. And I've got some dice, so we'll go ahead and roll up some examples. As you can see, I got 4 dice here, so we're going to say that my skill that I'm rolling is a weapon skill, and it's 4 dice. So I got 3 dice that are the same color and 1 that's its own color. And I'll roll those dice. And when you roll them, you just add them all together as normal. 4, 3, 2, and 1. So that'll be 7, 8, 9, 10. And as long as this die rolls anything but a 6 and a 1, you're okay. You just add everything up as normal. However, if we were to roll and it had come up as a 6, then we would add everything together, which makes this roll 13, and then we get to re-roll this die again as it explodes. We had a 4, so that takes our total up to 17. Now, if we had rolled another 6, we would add that to our total, which our original total for the 6 would be, now my math is failing me, 13, 19, now we're up to 25, so we'll roll it again because we rolled another 6. We rolled a 6 again. We'll add that, so we're up to 31, and you'll continue to roll this die until it rolls anything but a 6. And when it does that, you just add what you got, and that's your total. And that's what people call an exploding die. Now, if you roll a 1 when you're re-rolling the 6, nothing happens. You just add it and it ends. Now, if we were making our roll and we rolled a 1 naturally to begin with, then that will result in either a complication or a mishap. Either the game master can choose or he can make you roll, which is how they did it in the D6 Star Wars. And if it's a roll, then you roll the 6-sided die again, and if it comes up with anything but a 1, it's a mishap. If it's a 1, again, it's a complication. A mishap means that you'll lose this die that rolled the 1, and you also lose the highest die, which will leave us on our roll with 3. And that's what you're stuck with. Now, if it's a complication, you get to add everything together. So that gives us our 8. And you either succeed or fail, depending on what the roll difficulty is. And you get a negative effect with it. Now, in the D6 Star Wars game, how they describe the complication is that scene where Luke and Leia are running from the stormtroopers, and they close the door, and in order to lock it, Luke blasts the control panel. It locks the door because he rolled enough to succeed, but he did roll a 1 on his wild die and got a complication. That complication is he also destroyed the controls to extend the bridge. So that's a complication. And that's pretty much it for how the rolls work in this game. In this book, They have a few creatures in it. Not a whole lot. You really want more creatures in your fantasy game, but they kind of skimped on it in here. And the creatures that they have for you in this game is not much. They have a bird of prey, either a falcon or a hawk, a domestic cat, a large cat, which is either a lion, a puma, or a tiger, a cobra, a domestic dog, a guard dog, a horse, and a rat. For monsters, they have minor demons. They have a young dragon, evil humanoid, which is the goblin, kobold, or orc. So they got the goblin in here. They have a giant, and they have a walking dead, which is mummy, skeleton, or zombie. That's pretty much it. They do have a monster worksheet, so you can put together your own monsters. And we'll run through this, see if we can figure it out. You have the species name, so you'll name it. So we'll call our monster Clive. Clive's physical description: he has the body of a dog and the head of a deer with full antlers. Antlers are ridiculously big. They're like 8 feet. His habitat: he lives in the woods. Other information, which is social structure, defense of territory, predators, preferred prey, mating, etc. So basically you just write out what this monster does, how it acts, what it eats, what it prefers to eat, stuff like that. And then you have your game characteristics. Recommended 1 to 2D in attributes for creatures less powerful than the player's characters. 2D to 3D for powerful, and 4D or more for more powerful. Okay. Skills are generally 1 to 4 dice above those attributes. So it has each of the attributes here, and you'll just write in what the attributes of the creature are, and then if it has any skills, you'll put them out to the side, plus whatever dice you wish to put in the skills. Your strength damage, your move, your body points and wounds, they'll be figured up as if you were making up a regular character. Your natural abilities, and it says see special abilities on page 32 and 41. So you'll look up the special abilities in this book, and you will pick and choose ones to build your creature's natural abilities. For weaknesses, see disadvantages on page 17 to 27 for ideas. So basically you'll just use the weaknesses in the disadvantage section of this book. That's pretty much it for creature creation. So it's not that hard. You should be able to come up with some pretty interesting creatures. Our creature Clyde, he roams through the woods looking for children, and he eats the children. And that's pretty much what Clyde does. He has the horns to ward off predators so that he looks a lot bigger than he is. Otherwise, he looks like a Schnauzer dog body with a deer's head with 8-foot antlers. And that's Clyde. So, that covers creature creation. But I'm not sure what else to look at in here. It's got a bunch of equipment. Now, the choice between using a silver or using a funds is up to the game master. Personally, I would prefer to use silver. Luckily, the equipment in here gives you the cost in silver and a difficulty for the funds. And I just think it's much easier to keep track of the silver than it is to worry about the funds. But the funds can make it go a little easier because you don't have to track all those numbers. The spell creation in this is different than what it was in the earlier D6 game. In the earlier D6 game, it was much easier. They let you pretty much do what you want with it. But in this, there's actually a formula for it that you need to use to come up with your spells, the difficulties to use them and stuff. And what it is you got to figure out the spell's effect, its range, its speed, its duration, its area effect, the change to the target, changes, let's see, but you figure out all the aspects of the spell and you add them together once you get done to come up with a total. Now, once you got your total, you have some add-ons that you can add to these spells. And it's stuff that alters things a bit. And once you get them added up, you add them to your previous total, or excuse me, you subtract them from your previous total to come up with a new number. Then you cut that number in half, rounding up, and that's your difficulty for your spell. And I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory in here. And I don't feel like going through making up a spell right now, so because this video has already gone on long enough. But they have some pre-made spells in here that you could use for as a template. They have miracles, which is the cleric's version of spells. They have a worksheet here for your religion, and it basically helps you come up with like a codes of honor and stuff like that for your cleric. The name of his religion, what kind of religion is, his specific god and their power, tenets, the relationship to nature, food restrictions, how they feel about killing, stuff like that. So you get to build all that. And I think that's all I'm going to deep dive into this game for now. If you can think of any questions that you'd like to ask, go ahead and ask, and we'll see if we can look into them later. Or if there's another game you want me to take a little bit more of a deep dive into, let me know and we'll take a deeper dive into that. So thank you for joining me at this, something I haven't tried before, a deep dive. And hopefully you'll join me next time where we'll talk about something else. Bye.